As usual, beginning in a comfortable posture. I'm in my little meditation hut here, so I don't have a lot of room to spread out, but you don't have to sit like this. But do get comfortable. Softening your shoulders and your neck, releasing the crown of your head up. And yeah, for you and for anybody else who might be lurking in the background who hasn't heard the discussions about the practice as I go, because they've been a bit progressive so far, please do let me know when you have questions. Melanie's not here with me. She's back over at the river, and so I get to look at the comments directly. And if you have questions, I'm happy to explain more in depth about what we're doing. But of course, this stillness practice is always first. And you can do a simple standing practice, comfortable seated practice. You can lie down if you need to. Softening, letting everything go. And as well, again, because I'm still figuring this YouTube process out, let me know if you're hearing me through my headphones. I have these nice headphones, so there's a good speaker system. But then I discovered before that it was just echoing around and coming through my laptop. And so please let me know if the sound is terrible, and I'll try to adjust. The breath is comfortable and easy. The neck is soft, releasing upward. Relax your jaw and your tongue. Your upper back is soft. Your chest is empty. So I'll start going over some of the traditional posture shapes as we sit here, just to add them in. It's okay if you don't remember them. First is Xuling Ding Jing. It's this emptying of the neck and allowing this sense of lightness at the top of the head. The next one, Song Jian Chan Zhou. So you're softening the shoulders, letting them release. It's as though the elbows become heavy because your shoulders soften. Your hands are soft. Kongxiang Ba Bei. The sense of, oh, somebody's walking up to the door. 1 second. Hi, welcome. I'm teaching class. Sorry. Meditation petitioners. Just send them away. My YouTube family, my Chi family is waiting. Kongxiong Ba Bei. The sense of whatever we're holding in the chest, you let it fall. As your chest falls, your upper back opens, releases, further releasing your neck and your head floating upward. And the front, as your chest softens, Qi sinks to your Dantian. Dantian, in this case, the space between the navel and the spine. And if you're sitting, it becomes a little bit more difficult as we move down the body. The next one is Ta Yao Lian Cun, which is this softening of the lower back. We tend to arch and grip our lower back, and as we soften the lower back, it's as though the tailbone settles toward the ground as the back opens, but not because we tuck. Do not tuck. Yao Fu Song, soften your belly, release your back. Allow your breath to be natural. Hips are released, legs are soft, feet are soft. And when you're ready, get your hands nice and warm. I'm going to take off my headphones here. So hopefully you'll still hear me. If it gets difficult at all, let me know and I'll put them back on or try something else. Palms resting on top of the head. Center of the hand. Top of the head. 5 meetings. Gentle circles. Try not to push down so hard that it compresses your neck. Just the weight of your hands. And you're not trying to scrub over the surface of your skin, but rather gently move the skin itself, circling the tent. Both directions. Oh, good job. How about this? Let me know. We will figure it out. But I'm glad it's coming through the headphones. That's a good sign. Excellent. Coming to you live. Straight from the Dao. And then using your fingertips from the eyebrows all the way back. Oh, still in and out. I guess I'll just do this. Pretend that I am scraping my scalp and you do it. Distant chi healing scraping. And then using the back of your hand, scrubbing the back of your head. On both sides. And emphasize with this corner of your hand, massaging the space at the base of the skull, at the top of the neck, across this line down here. And when you do it, this is what I've mentioned in some other videos, as the hand comes up, don't let the shoulder come up. The hand comes up, the shoulder rotates, the shoulder blade sinks down the back. That makes space for the hand to travel. And so as your hand comes back, if anything, it actually softens your shoulder further. It's a very different interaction. On both sides, scrubbing scrubbing thoroughly enough so that the warmth soaks into the area. And part of what we've been talking about is allowing this heat to gather into the channels. And eventually the heat warms the channels and radiates back out. You're just pushing hard enough to settle into that space below the surface of the skin, into the fascial layer, into the spaces in between the tissues. Scrubbing the neck, and also the base of the neck, top of the C7 point, or excuse me, bottom of the C7 point, top of the upper thoracic spine area. Yes, so, sorry, I wasn't able to do it with the headphones on. So you're scrubbing the back of your head, scrubbing the place where your skull meets the top of your neck, scrubbing the neck itself, and then scrubbing cervical vertebra 7. It's the point Da Zui Du 14, right where the base of the neck and the top of the thoracic vertebra meet. And you'll do this with both hands. Awkward with the headphones on, but I appreciate all the feedback. Get that area nice and warm, especially in this weather. If you've been in the wind, this is the area in the body where the cold and the wind tend to creep into the body. They work their way into the channels. You get that stiff neck. It affects a lot. And so by simply warming the area up with gentle friction, gentle pressure, until that sense of movement and warmth penetrates into the body and softens that area, especially if you have that traditional, what they used to call the dowager's hump. It's that building shape of thick tissue that tends to occur back there. I had that really badly. I had a whole scoliosis history, for those of you who haven't heard about it. And as that went away, this thickness and the thickening in the tissue that happened right at the top of the neck, or excuse me, the top of the spine, base of the neck, that tended to become thin and quieter as it spread out. And so that's part of what we're looking for, is that sense of warmth and movement through that area. And then moving to the face, get the hands nice and warm. Only ever use warm hands on your body. And again, gently pressing your palms over your eyes, allowing that sense of warmth to soak in. Fresh, clear chi softening the space behind your eyes, the musculature around the eyes, and then ironing off the sides. 3 times. Oh, sure. Off the sides. It is a subject that I talk a little bit about in the regular snake and turtle videos, but my preparation is I've been working toward a big video about breath. Softening around to the face, off to the sides. And then with the tips of the middle fingers, massaging beside the nose, gently opening this point here. You take your time, especially if you've been feeling congested or uncomfortable here. Up and down. Again, developing a sense of warmth and openness through this area. And then gently massaging around the orbit of the eye. Both directions, emphasizing the movements that spread and open the face, counteracting that tendency to crumple and compress the face toward the center. Pushing just hard enough to soften the tissues. If you push too hard, you just compress the tissues against the bone and you actually stop the flow. Then with the inside of the index fingers, massaging up and down along the inner edge of the eyebrow. And then drawing off the sides. Massaging the temples. Just on the outer edge of this bony orbit around the eye, in that location between the end of the eye and the end of the eyebrow, more or less. Everyone's body's a bit different. And then we're going to move to the ears. That flap, pardon me, here, just the line where the ear ends, moving into the face, there's this little cartilage flap called the tragus. And work that with your fingertips. Oh, great. Yeah, I agree. And then working the corner of the jaw. Again, just pressing deeply enough to release the tissue that tends to grab and collect here. You're not trying to press into the musculature. It's not that kind of practice. Take the time to warm and soften. In this case, you're not using friction so much as you are simply moving the tissue around, moving the skin. A gentle roll. For those of you who study Chinese massage, circling motion. And then from this point, all the way up and down. And also with one finger traveling behind the ear. I'll take my headphones off again for just a moment. But what we're going to do is massage the line from the jaw to the front and the space behind the ear. We'll do that maybe 18 times. And then we will scrub the ears themselves, rubbing up and down on the ears, and then massaging around the rim and the earlobe. I'll take them off, so I'm not sure what that will do to my voice. But ideally, we would do this until that sense of warmth, as though you're pouring warm oil into your ear, that begins to fill and work these channels that are all around the ear. Again, these are very exposed to the weather, especially this time of year, which is why we emphasize this particular sequence now. You want to heat and purge those areas. And now we will compress the ears, let's say 9 times, gently, just enough so there's a sense of a compression wave pushing into the ear a bit, stimulating that space. And then on the last compression, hold the compression and gently tap your fingers against the back of the head. And for those of you that saw me explain that compression tapping against the do 20 point, you can include that. A little harder for me to turn around in this position. And then from there, using the sides of the hands here, we're going to gently massage down and forward. There's this tight band of sinew and tissue and vein and artery all in through here. And we want to release all the way down. There's even deep muscles called the scalings under there. Tend to cause a lot of tension, headaches, and things. And then as well, reaching across with the fingertips, massaging down through just the weight of the fingers. You don't want to sink in deep enough to cause further tension. Again, you'll notice it's not even changing my voice, just enough. It also helps the draining of the ears. I know some of you have some ear issues. You can also do it just here, the level of the collarbone. There's insertions in here. If you find yourself with wonderful. Moving on, let's sink the chi down to the navel just to make sure that everything is settling. Yeah, that's called the ear compression movement. It's called beating the heavenly drum. It's in all of the various styles I've studied over the years. And I've heard a number of healing stories associated with it. Just one, actually, this New Year's, I was on a long winter meditation retreat. And there's a story of a woman that she had a kind of compression style hearing aid. And she would take them in, put them out all the day long. And so there was always doing this compression thing. And she would use them for some week or something, and her ears would get better. So she'd stop using them, and then her ears would slowly get worse. And she'd start using them again, putting them in, taking them out. And so then she just started doing this practice, and her ears stayed good, and she didn't use her hearing aids anymore. And I've heard lots of stories like that. So good practice to keep going. Everyone here is pretty young, except me, Chris. We're getting old, approaching 50. So it's nice to take care of our ears and our bodies. At this stage, then, what we're doing, just as a reminder, is we're creating that sense of warmth and heat. And so if you use your awareness, explore the area that we just worked on. You should be able to feel this gentle heat radiating from all of these parts, not in a feverish or uncomfortable sense, but a full and active sense. All of the yang qi has filled this space, and things are softening because of it. And if there's any places that you missed, you might be able to scan your body and feel, oh, I didn't quite warm this area. And you spend some extra time there. And sometimes one side requires a lot more work than the other. And that's natural. It's easier. The other thing that we're doing is this gentle touch, not pushing deep, not trying to do damage. I've heard of a lot of people doing damage to themselves. Just be gentle. We're not trying to project chi. We're not trying to force change. We're just asking. There's this traditional Taoist way of thinking. It's very important. You don't have to memorize the Chinese, but the Chinese is Dao Fa Ci Ren, which is the method of the Dao is Ci Ren. It's automatic, it's natural. It happens on its own. And all practices should follow this deep idea of not trying to make things happen, but instead you create the conditions within which things happen on their own, like healing. And if we try to force change, all we do is get in our own way. And what happens, like some of us have been talking about recently, is that, like in a relationship, if I try to force change, the person just pushes back. In my body, if I try to push into my body, the impact of that is that my body pushes back. And we develop more tension and a whole mental, emotional habit pattern. So instead, we explore a different way, gentle, opening, just like you were saying. It creates something very different. I see you, Chris. So the next one, then, let's go ahead and move down the arms. So just using this simple part of the arm. My pleasure. Now that I'm away from the head, it'll be a little easier to talk about the breath as well, since you asked. Softening this area open. You can also soften the space beneath the armpit, the connection points to the ribs. Remember that this is the front of the shoulder, connects to the sternum. This point here, this articulation point, is the only spot where all of these bones in the shoulder connect to the central skeleton, the axial skeleton here. So this is the one articulation point. All of this is floating and should be able to smoothly slide all over the body. The reason why it doesn't for most people is because we've turned it into cement. So, or maybe ice is a better example. We want to warm that ice until it turns to liquid and eventually to steam. So we soften that space open. Soften down under here. Soften the top. And be very gentle. And if you know where your most icy conditions lie, spend extra time to soften them there. You can work on that central shoulder joint itself. Remember the 6 ends, the 6 corners of the shoulder are the front. Up here is the top. bottom of the shoulder. The back of the shoulder connects to the spine and through the shoulder blade. There's the middle corner, in a sense. It's a weird translation. The outer corner is down here. We tend to suck our shoulders in, and all of this is hampered in movement and chi flow. So we have to release long. We song chang, we soften long that way. I'm not pushing my hand out. I'm letting go of everything that's bunching it up. By letting go, that creates the conditions within which my arm on its own softens long. It gets several inches longer. And this shape of softening outward is what we're looking for. So as you release the upper arm and the shoulder, you want to have this downward and outward sense of the movement, helping chi flow outward to the fingertips. And then very gently, using perhaps this small knuckle here, working on the point that's at the end of this elbow crease. Try to put it here so you can see it more easily. But you can sit in whatever way is comfortable. Gently stimulating this point, large intestine 11. Warming and releasing. This is that area that we tend to grip in toward, all of this compression. And we release it all outward this way. And then, several centimeters below that, if you've been studying Chinese medicine, the body inch is called sun, 2 sun down, pointing toward the index finger. Warming and softening. And then the inside of the arm, releasing outward toward the thumb. Lung 5. And then we release down to the inner and outer gates between these tendons in the center here. A couple inches again, in this case above the wrist crease. You don't want to dig in. It doesn't take a lot to stimulate the points. You allow your influence, the warmth, to sink into these areas. And then softening here. There's a heart line here we'll access from the outside. Gently compressing with your fingertips all along this line from the wrist upward. See if it's a good way to show you. In this case, just on this side of the tendon. And then, large intestine 4, he gu, this central point here, setting my thumb into that spot, gently stimulating the point. Again, we're able to compress it until we completely stop all of the circulation. Or we can do nothing, or you can sink in just deeply enough to stimulate the area. And if you'd like at the same time, and if your hands are big enough, this opposite point here, small intestine 3, you can stimulate them both at the same time. And with your fingers, gently reaching and drawing chi and blood toward the fingertips. And for those of you that have sore thumbs here, you can spend some time warming that, pushing toward the thumb tip of the fingers. This is just if you're developing that discomfort. Other side. So as we move through this, I'll talk about the movements less and I'll talk about the breath, since that was a question. And I'll have to answer the question obliquely, just because it's a long discussion, and as well, I don't know who's watching the video, and it may give bad information for people that don't have enough context. The breath, intent, and posture done poorly, these tend to be, I'd say, the three most common ways that people injure themselves. Breath control, clenching the mind, an incorrect use of intent, we would say. And of course, just standing with your knees locked or something. These are things that will cause a great deal of damage when people practice Qigong. It happens all the time. It's actually a huge part of my clinic, unfortunately. And so, and some of the people here, if you make friends in the comment section, you'll meet a bunch of the people that have suffered from damage from incorrect practice. And so, to answer the question carefully about breath and reverse breath and these kinds of things, is that in general, the most important aspect of breath is to do it. And which is to say, it's an important piece of practice to learn not to hold the breath. There are some practices where we do something called suspending the breath, but we never hold the breath. And it is a very common habit in people dealing with a lot of tension, and tension in the nervous system, compression through poor posture, these kinds of things, or emotional tension, that they stop breathing. And so it is very important to learn to be mindful and to be clear enough to notice if you are somebody who tends to hold your breath or to force your breath to be shallow. It's also very important that we don't artificially push the breath around, because that can cause some big problems. And this is from me coming from a life of, I grew up and I was practicing a kind of childhood Kundalini and pranayama practice, and it caused a lot of problems in me, and as well, especially in some of the people that were around me. And it's very important to first learn to release the breath. And when we say that in this context, we're also talking about learning to release the mind, like I said, not clenching the mind, and to release the posture so that there's space for the breath, because it's possible to position our bodies in such a way that we are making it impossible to breathe. And that, of course, is very common. And these are all pieces to be aware of when we're talking about the breath. And then from there, the next most important piece within this system, at least, because again, it's Dao thoughts are in, we create the conditions within which things change. So if I want my breath to be slow and deep, I don't control my breath to be slow and deep. Instead, I adjust myself, whether through posture or through the mind or through an internal practice, until my breath is then the signal that that change has occurred. My breath is the result, not the practice. It's just the signifier that maybe you did something right. And so often if we try to push around the signifier, we've missed the actual practice from the perspective of this system. And so the same is true with regular breath and reverse breath, that once we realize that the breath is actually something that happens on its own, and that the way that we allow the breath to move is to make space, that we notice, and there's all kinds of practices that we'll be doing. If I make space anywhere in my torso, for instance, or elsewhere in my body, the breath flows into those areas. So if I soften my chest naturally fills with breath. If I soften my belly naturally fills with breath. Even if you'll see I'll soften my solar plexus, and just my solar plexus, I'll hold my navel, just my solar plexus will fill with breath. I don't know if you can see that from the side. Not my chest, not my belly, but my solar plexus. And that's not me controlling it. It's me letting go of those spaces so they fill. And that capacity to release the body from the inside is a really important stage of practice. And so I was waiting to teach a series of videos helping people open each of these sections before I started talking too directly about the breath. But I'd like to answer your question since you've been doing this for a while. And the same then is true with the practice. If I move in a way that my body opens, it's like opening the bellows. That's also from the Taiji classics that we were talking about. If I open the bellows, like something that blows air, if I spread my accordion open for you musicians, it fills with air on its own. I didn't push the air into it, I made space. And nature loves a vacuum, and it fills it. And then when you compress that space, the air moves out, the chi moves out. Consolidate maybe is a better word. I don't want people to tense up to compress. And so as we practice, if I move in such a way that my body opens and there's space made, it fills with breath. And then that space changes and my breath changes. And how do we make space? We let go. We sumchong, we soften long. Space happens, not because we're pushing, because pushing just creates more tension. Tension is the thing that gets rid of all the space, and the mind as well. So by making space, qi flows in, breath flows in, spirit is present. And we want to make as much space as we can. And so the practices, any Qigong practice or Taiji practice or any of these things, the breath is constantly changing. And you want to allow the breath to change because the breath is moving around where it needs to go with the mind and with everything else. And then reverse breath is simply, it's a certain shape for those of you who don't know about it, that can happen if you adjust the movement of front and back of your breath and where your chi is opening. So if I Danxian rotates, which is a thing, my lower back, my Mingmen opens, my breath can adjust where it's moving. And when that happens, the shape of the breath changes, and that's normal and actually very healthy. But if we're doing the reverse breath, that causes blood pressure to shift, and it's not great for the body, according to this system. And so breath is that result. And these unusual shapes of the breath, there's actually a lot of them. There's turtle breathing and all these different kinds of breath, where the breath becomes very fine and penetrates into the tissues very deeply. And the only way to allow for that is to make space through softness, inside as well as outside. Moving on to the torso, I hope that answers the question a little bit, and in my limited way that I can do here without going on a full exploration of it. And I intend to probably produce about 10 videos exploring breath with different methods. But first we have to go through a series so people can at least try to open their torso a little bit first. Because if people are just compressed, then there's no way to help them open to breathe naturally. It can only be a product of tension. I have a plan. I have a plan. And then, just because we have someone here that has a great deal of solar plexus tension, same thing, just here at the top of the V. We're in 17, we're in 14 for those of you keeping score. I'm sorry, I'll read this here now. Clenching the mind, yeah, it's a very common problem, and maybe the most difficult step for people. Both hands, both directions. That's great. Also rubbing that space between the solar plexus and the navel, warming these areas. I'm glad you like them. And I apologize. I'm a little bit dyslexic in English, and so it takes me some time to go through the comments. That's why when Melanie is helping, it's much easier for me. Is reverse breath necessary? No, definitely not. No. Um, there are some people that will use what are traditionally, again, at least as far as I know, I don't mean to pretend that I know everything, but as far as I've learned through my scholastic wanderings, the methods that people tend to borrow to keep the body warm, and there's all these methods, and I won't go into them because it gets people upset when I mention names. Most of them are borrowed Tibetan teachings. This is across the navel. And the Tibetan teachings are taught as part of a larger system in context. I've talked to some of these guys, and it takes years of a kind of traditional training with a person there watching them, a certain diet, a certain way of being. It's usually young men, and they do this certain practice, and it pumps up what we would hear called like yang qi, and so they get really warm. And it's done to aid them in their actual stillness practice. So they go out then, and they're very still in these cold places, but they're able to stay warm. And it requires a certain diet, and it requires all these pieces. And again, people are checking on them, and they're only sent out to do these things once they've become very still and grounded inside, very anchored, we would say. They develop a dantian. They call it like the crimson pill. I think crimson is their color. And it's a whole thing. But then people go, ooh, I like the idea of being warm. And so they take out certain pieces, the breath shape, maybe the posture, if they use a certain mudra. Um, they fold their legs in a certain way, and they do this practice that pumps up their nervous system and makes them really hot. But they're missing the health. Usually, they're missing the capacity to anchor and ground themselves deeply in their meditation as their chi rushes upward to support this yang qi. And they're missing the internal conditions within which that would be appropriate. And so it starts to cause all these problems. And here, where I am in Washington, I'm surrounded by people that do wilderness awareness training and different kinds of things. And they use methods that keep them warm in the snow or these things. And they're developing all these emotional issues and mental issues. And some of them practice with me. They're like, why are you becoming so calm? Why is this working so well for me and not for them? And it's because on the side, they're doing all these other practices that are imbalancing them. But at least they're warm, right? Because they can't apparently wear a sweater. And so, in general, I really urge caution with those methods. Not because they are inherently dangerous, but because all medicine should be given to the right person at the right time with somebody who knows when to give it. And people pick and choose from books and videos, and it can be really dangerous. And I say that from my own experience. Qigong damage has been a really big part of my clinic over the years, trying to help people, and it is wildly common. I have a whole few videos about it. Massaging the inguinal groove here. Glad you're asking these questions. Oh, good. Tell your sister boy say hi. This method here, this is stomach 30 in the center of the inguinal crease. Our intent here is to push qi down through the legs. This point when we stimulated in the snake and turtle qigong practice is more for opening the spine. Now we're going to slide around to the back, hands slipping around the waist to the lower back, palms resting on the lower back, massaging up and down. And again, if you're somebody who's watching this that has a lot of wrist, elbow, shoulder pain, make sure first that you don't crouch or tighten up trying to reach these areas. My hands are simply rubbing up and down along those muscles near the spine. You're welcome to use the backs of your hands if that's more comfortable, one hand at a time. Nice and warm. If your shoulders or your arms start to get tired, then pause, take a break. There's no virtue in getting exhausted here. We're trying to nourish the body, not tire it. Practice the right thing, and you'll get better at the right thing. Don't practice exhaustion and tension. We can use this part of the hand to rub across horizontally at the level of the navel on the spine. The point of the spine here is called Mingmen. Laterally from that point, we have bladder channels, Shen Shui, Sui is just the name of a cave. And then we're going to use our fingertips to rub the full length of the tailbone, down to the tip of the tailbone, back up to the lower back of the Mingmen. Thanks for telling. And so as a reminder, for those of you who may have missed it, in general during the winter, this sense of radiating heat we want to cultivate in certain areas. Back of the neck, the tops of the shoulders, your face is really important. Keeping the lungs warm is really important. Certain joints if you have joint pain. But for longevity, the belly, lower back, the tailbone, keep these areas warm. It's far too common for people to sit on cement or something and the cold soaks into these areas and causes problems. So please avoid doing that. How much time do we have? Oh, good. Moving down. So we can use the fingertips just below the pelvic crest here, down on the buttock, warming the top line. There's often tension there where lower back attaches. And then down below, and again, I apologize, a little harder for me to demonstrate this area in this setup. I might have to move the camera around a bit. Let's see, push these guys out of the way. I left all my meditation equipment in the hall. I can show you my fancy socks. Very strange socks. That's I recommend a charity organization that gives you these hilarious socks. The Awesome Sock Club. Fantastic charity work. It's just a nice way to donate. This was my birthday present from somebody, was memberships to these charities. Now I have all these wild socks. Massaging center of the thighs. You can work this localized point if you like. And again, I know at least one of you has a lot of tension along the side. So you can spend time warming and soothing this area, but be extra gentle. This, possibly more than almost any other place in the body, is really reactive. My old teachers would say, don't spank the crying baby. Be gentle, loving, warm. This whole set is a deep practice of self-compassion, tenderness. Especially in my culture, I don't want to speak for me, guys are not allowed to be gentle and tender. We're supposed to be hard. And so this kind of practice where you're just going, oh, that's okay, soothing the body, listening, responding, it's something that we actively cultivate against for most of our lives. And then we have to spend the second half of our life healing it. Hey, you like my socks? Thanks, I made the shirt. All for sale online. So this is the end of the quadricep muscle here. And then on the inside, quadricep muscle. And if you like, you can also warm the whole cheek. Practice this until there's this deep sense of warmth soaking in. I don't know if Anna is here today. She was talking about her knee pain before, And it's something I've suffered a lot from especially just stupid martial arts injuries over a lifetime of being ridiculous. And I felt tough at the time, and now I'm going, why did I do that? So now I spend lots of my time warming and softening my knees because they need it. Space just beneath the knee, that soft space at the crease, the fold of the knee, popliteal crease, between the two tendons. And I know one person was asking about flexibility, that this can be a very difficult thing for people to reach. And so you want to find yourself in a chair. You don't have to do it the position that I'm doing it. You can fold your leg and reach in there, sit in a chair, lie in a bed, lay on your back, lift your knee if that helps. Everyone's body is different, sometimes because we're creaky and old, or maybe we have larger bodies. Occasionally we're pregnant. So be gentle and find the way for your body. And now, working down the space just below the kneecap here. Here's the shin bone running up. Here's my knee. This musculature on the outside of the shin, the anterior tibialis, just at the top of this muscle here. You can rub that point, stomach 36. Fantastic point for nourishing the chi. If you know anything about moxibustion, I highly recommend it. If you'd like to work this point at the same time as spleen 9 here on the inside of the tibia, a nice one to attach with. And these together, this combination of the spleen and stomach, can be really nourishing. Again, we're not pushing hard, we're warming and softening this area. It's just that they're very narrow, so we use fingers instead of palms. It's more behind the inspiration, behind the creation. Oh, oh, I didn't even show you the back of the shirt. So, and now they're dead. That's just, I like creating silly things. So much of my life is filled with seriousness and meditation, so I wear funny socks and make ridiculous shirts. It's just a symptom of my madness. And then we're going to move to gallbladder 34. So in this posture that I'm in, here's my kneecap. Maybe you can see on camera here. If I go diagonally outward, I find the bone, which is part of the top of my shin. If I continue in that diagonal, I find another bone, which is actually a muscle or a bone coming from the rest of my leg, the back of my leg. So I have 3 in a row. These 2 out here, I can make a triangle with them. And that is gallbladder 34. It's just a little bit outside of the last one we were doing. And again, if you can't find it, that's okay. It's worth looking up and spending some time trying to find it, Googling it, or we can do it online together. But even if you can't find it, you just work the side of your leg the way we were up here, perfectly okay. So I'm going to do that, use my palms. But if you can find it, it's a wonderful spot to spend time on. The crazy Daoist. It is a thing. For the practices I grew up doing, because I've been doing meditation and these things my whole life, if I hadn't been saved by this system which grounded me, I definitely would have continued off in the wrong direction and made myself very sick, chasing power and chasing abilities and trying to make myself feel better because I was deeply afraid of the world and myself, as a lot of us are. So the next one, we're going to move down into this calf muscle here. And again, everyone's body is shaped differently. But at the top of the calf, from the backside, there's this V that can form. You have these muscles that lay over each other. And so if you go to the top of the V, so penetrate down to the musculature beneath, this is urinary bladder 57, supporting mountain. You can get in there and press. I'll sit like this and press my fingertips into that spot in the center of the calf. You can work around a little bit. It doesn't have to be only in that one spot. And a bit more pressure in this place to try to reach that soleus, the deeper muscle. If it's tender, because of the habit of standing or maybe damage, then continuing with it. And one of the fun and completely baseless guarantees that I make is that if you do this set every day for the 100 days, you will have a lot less discomfort here when you press. It should be softer and more open. There's no soreness or discomfort for me at all anymore. But I remember, hitting the ceiling when I first pressed in here. You can work your way down the Achilles, all the way to the heel. And at the same time, if you'd like, again, that shin muscle, you can use your fingertips to pluck across it, just pulling toward you. Not trying to stimulate it too hard. It can be a little irritable, especially for somebody who does running or this kind of thing where they're constantly damaging this connectivity, this tissue. So you want to soothe it, soften it. For those of you who spend some time in the gym, I know some of you at least do, spend time cultivating this, depending on the style of work that you do. It's too easy to overemphasize the contractile tissue on one side and not the other for balance, and people can develop knee and ankle problems because of it. And gait problems. They're the way they move changes quite a lot. So you want to cultivate all of your body if you're cultivating any of it. And then, with the flat of the palm, scrubbing over spleen 6. So this point here, just couldn't quite get the eyeball up there where the star is. This a little bit above the ankle, just the width of your fingertips up from that medial malleolus point, and the line where the shin bone falls off into the soft tissue. You can scrub that with your palm. If you'd like to, you can widen that circle to include the space just beneath your ankle, your inner ankle. These are spleen and kidney points. That spleen 6 point is fabulous for a lot of reasons. If you happen to be somebody with a period, then you might notice that during those times, this point just gets wildly sensitive. So you want to spend some extra time there. And if you've had ankle issues, I think you were mentioning ankle issues. Frozen shut, yeah. Sorry about that. There's a lot of ways to heal that we'll work on. And if you've rolled your ankle in the past, spend some time on the outside, below this ankle, the outer ankle. There's a soft spot there called gallbladder 40. But all the way around there, if you just work with your fingers a little bit to open it up, that can be a really useful thing, especially once you've created all this warmth on the inside. A funny thing happens when we roll our ankles, and I mention this because it seems like all of us have done this at some point, that we usually roll this way. So we hyperstretch this. And then this tissue responds with problems and tearing and inflammation, but all of these tissues become really tight to brace against the overstretching, to try to overcorrect it, because that's what our body does, and it pulls back. And the really funny thing is that the place that ends up the very tightest is actually on the inside, because that initial pulling back causes this side to pull back even harder. And so there's a huge amount of stretching and damage that gets done to the tissues from rolling your ankle. When the damage is over here, the stretching and the fascia damage actually happens over here. It's very fascinating. So you want to work all of it. And then, kidney point on the bottom of the foot, warming the spleen channel on the side, dropping your fingers into that point between the two tendons, the first and the second toe. Nice and warm. Give your foot a wake up pat. We'll do more of that. And then we switch sides. Dun, dun, dun. Again, only sit like this if it's comfortable. It's easy to sit in a chair. If I was back in my other room, I would sit on that stool. Settle your thumbs into the center of the calf, softening it open. Thawing out your calf and ankle. Thawing out is actually a pretty good metaphor. The gentleman that came to the door earlier looking for help, he's somebody I've known him for years and years. And the biggest amount of help we were able to give him came from meditation. He had been doing Zen for years. He's actually off and on been going back to a Zen monastery. The last few years he's been there, and he came back just recently here. Because we keep having to help him fix damage that he's doing to himself from the practice there. But he's religiously dedicated to it, so he keeps doing the method. And there seems to be a habitual clenching of the mind, this holding of the mind. And for some people, it's much more difficult to release those than for others. He's a wonderful man. And I would love to help him just soften his approach. And one of the ways that he pushes himself isn't just with his mind, but also his body. He becomes very disconnected. And so his body gets very cold. And so he will work, wonderful work that he does, often outside. And his body just gets ice cold to the touch so that he can't feel it anymore, especially his feet, his legs, his lower back, his tailbone. He sits on the ground. He can't feel it after a little while. And his body, of course, responds to the cold, as all bodies do, by contracting and sealing shut. And so how do you heal that? You, as you mentioned, you thaw it out. You warm it up. And when he first came here years and years ago, the one thing I asked him to do was to start wearing socks and warm things and to get a better jacket, and because he's kind of a tough guy, and so he just wore thin things even in the winter here, or in Washington where it's chilly, and better shoes, and to soak in baths, and to use an electric blanket at night to stay warm in his little meditation space here. And suddenly all his aches and pains were going away, and he was sleeping better, and all these things changed, huge differences. And so understanding just this ability to stay warm so that your chi doesn't have to constantly contend with trying to keep you warm, an enormous shift for people. It's good to get a little cold once in a while to challenge yourself, as long as you have enough chi to warm up again. But for most people, first they have to be warm. They have to thaw out, like you said, and to heal the tissue damage that's happened from the environment. So these days I am a big advocate of things like electric socks and electric warming things and jackets, and just things that will help keep people warm. Hot pads and hot baths, and it is amazing how often just warming up solves a problem. Even when I was living in Arizona, the problem there was that usually people would live in air conditioning all the time. And so they had this really funny back and forth where they're too hot or too cold. And everybody has these Adobe style tiles, these wonderful Spanish style tiles in their house that people walk around because it's hot. They're barefoot in their house on cold tile. And it was amazing how often I was treating plantar fasciitis and foot pain and these kinds of problems. People would come, and they'd want acupuncture or different methods. And the first thing I would tell them to do is go home and soak their feet in hot water. This worked for my own sister. And it solved it. You know, doctors talk about shots and surgery sometimes, and Just try a little hot water, warmer feet. It is wild how often something like that helps. I spent all my life studying and learning all these funny medical skills, and then the remedy I offer is hot water. It's pretty ridiculous. All right. Let's see, what were the questions here? Oh, from Phoenix. Yeah, I was in Tucson. Oh, sure, yeah. Yep. I don't know him personally, but, you know, the world there is pretty small. How much time do we have? Let's see. Oh, great. So, let's do one of the openings that we were working on yesterday. Here, just a comfortable position, as comfortable as you can be. Of course, it's much easier if you're sitting up on a cushion. You could do this even at the edge of your chair if you'd like. But what I'd like to do is just practice opening the hips very slightly this way. This is from a question that we were having. Gently circulating downward. Now, what I'm trying to do is from here to my foot is to lengthen and soften the tissues out. What people tend to do is as they're coming this way is they tighten their leg. You can put your hands on your quads, and if you feel as you're traveling down that you tighten your leg and grip, then you're going the wrong direction. What we want to do instead is soften the leg out toward the toes. And the same is true with the body. That what we tend to do is we shorten, we tighten, we pull down toward our body. But what we want to do instead is to lengthen, both sides lengthening away from each other, down, reaching out, softening long, becoming flexible, not because we are stretching in the traditional sense of pulling against something, but becoming soft. We talked about this yesterday quite a bit. Softening, releasing the nervous system. I'm not feeling a stretch at all here, and I don't want to. Become flexible by releasing, like a baby. Same on the other side. Simply releasing long. Softening all the way through. So I soften my shoulders. I release the crown of my head up. My neck is soft and long. I release my leg. Soften here. Soften your tissues. Become flexible like a baby. If you find yourself pulling against yourself, that your tissues are screaming, remember that the stretch response is just your body trying to warn you and protect you. So listen to it. Soften. Move through. Chi flows to your foot and out. Now, let's do these circles. Circling your toes. Let me know if you need me to adjust the camera angle here. So my toes are making a full circle. So we'll shift these over a bit. My tiny little space. Ta-da. Cold and wintry out here today. You can press with your legs, circulating. You want the movement to travel all the way up to your hips. Both directions. Make sure, again, you're not crouching or tightening. You're releasing. Keep all the warmth and softness that we've been cultivating. This is a great one also if you do a lot of seated meditation. At the end of it, it's a nice way to release any accumulated tension in your legs. Eventually, you want to be able to sit, and there's no discussion of circulation problems or compression. Your body's just open. And then we're going to reach out, gather, pull to our back, up the spine, flowing up, falling forward. I'm just going to let my hands fall here, raking your fingers up above the knee, reaching out, and with your hands and your feet, you grip. Not tight, lengthening your arm, pulling around. Chi flows up, filling the low back, softening upward, lengthening your spine, lengthening your neck, your shoulders are soft. Fall forward as far as your hips release. You don't want to crouch, just like we were practicing. Don't strain your body, only move as far as feels comfortable and effortless. You slowly increase this over time. Eventually, hopefully, at the end of the 100 days, we'll do this the full 36 times. But I don't want to do it too early because people will just end up feeling sore. And that's not the point. You want to feel like you've been sitting in a warm bath. Tissue is soft and melted. Notice any place you might be gripping. And let it go. And we'll just stop there. Come back to a seated position, wherever you are. Check the time. How much time do I have? Oh, there we go. Figure out the computer. We're going to soften in place, along the length of your spine. As you soften to the seat, try to allow the weight to rest just in front of the sitting bones. As you soften down, there's a feeling of lifting through the top of the head. The more you soften, the more lift and fullness there is. You don't want to try to lift and hold yourself up because you'll actually get in the way of this cultivation. And in this space, settle. Gently begin turning, shaking the pillar. The whole spine softens and lengthens. We're moving not from the shoulders and the elbows, not turning the head, not trying to turn the shoulders or the chest. Turn your navel from side to side. That's why this is nice to do when sitting. Slowly releasing. I just let go. My body's soft enough that it's just continuing to move like this. The softer you are, the longer it seems to take. You just wait for it to slowly ease off. I'm just sitting here. The ripples kind of find their way through. And soften down. You can settle your hands on your legs if you'd like. You can place your hands on top of your navel. Allow your whole body to soften for a moment. Feel the warmth and fullness, the release. Remember that if you focus habitually on the obstructions, on the tight places, your chi moves in the direction of your intent, and you're just more likely to create more tension, which makes sense. If you're thinking about being tense all the time, you become more tense. So instead, tune your awareness. I spent the morning making a musical instrument. And that same, you want to tune your awareness for softness, openness, warmth, Find those places that are warm and softened and allow those places to spread into the spots next to them by getting out of the way. Notice the way that you're obstructing yourself and let it go. Just open. And then allow your awareness to accumulate in that space, either at the navel or at the Mingmen, opposite the navel in your back, or ideally, in the space just in between. Questions? Fancy computer. This was so kind. The longer you carry it with you, the better. I love that warm bubble bath feeling. That is a great way to think of it. This quality of sensation is a really useful thing to cultivate. There's a Chinese word for it. It's it's a funny sounding word, and it's this moist, full, warm quality, usually attributed to a baby's skin. This rosy feeling, um, whatever skin color you turn when your skin is the healthiest, and that feeling of lively, vibrant health that radiates from the inside out. That's a feeling you want to aim for, and you can cultivate it in any practice. Of course, every Qigong method, every internal art, leaves you feeling different. Some leave you feeling really stable. Some leave you feeling really tall and long, or floppy and loose. And it's nice to do the right one, for instance, just before bed, and not the one that will pump you up. There's Qigong that are better at certain times of day than others, in the same way there's Qigong that are really good at certain times of year. And this is a great time of year to have a warm bubble bath feeling, as you perfectly said. And so that quality of cultivation is something you want to listen for and begin to allow it to spread. And for those of us on here that are new, new to Qigong, new to any of this stuff, or just learning the basics, they may go, warm bubble bath feeling, what is that? I want that. And yes, you do. And we get it not by using force, but by becoming soft and gentle and open and easy. And the better you can cultivate those qualities, it makes these practices themselves really effective. It's those qualities of gentleness and lovingness that make the change. And so you have to understand what the causes are and what the effects are. And clearly, I'm not the only one that recommends it. Sure. Yeah, the Dantian are found in different places, and it depends on how we're referring to it. Dan it's the elixir, it's the medicine. In Taoist practice, it's referencing a kind of cultivation that comes from intentless intent, a deep, settled awareness, when all of these qualities of nurturing chi and this open, clear mind and a calm heart come together, and you blend those qualities together of heaven, humanity, and earth, the three treasures, Jing, Qi, and Shen, together in the body. it becomes this quality that they call dan, or this medicine. And what you do with it makes a difference. And within this Daoist system, at least this tradition, thousands of years old, it, depending where you place it, different stages of your practice, things cultivate differently. And so this meditative, quiet cultivation method, like with the seated we were just doing, is a very basic Taoist meditation. And it rests in that place between the navel and the spine. And my teachers and teachers' teachers would say that there is a misunderstanding from the texts, that some people would say that if they read something and it's xia yitsun, like one soon lower, 1 inch, body inch lower than the navel. And so people look down and they go, oh, there. Ah. But at least in our system, we would say, well, they meant that you're lying on a table and a doctor's talking to you, and they're saying 1 inch lower inside. And by inch in this case, they just mean a distance. But so that's one way of answering it. It's just that it's a misunderstanding. I have a different opinion, more that each place in the body cultivates something different. And so any space can be a danxian. A tian is just a field of something where you cultivate something, like you plant a seed and it grows. And the fields themselves have to be created. So everyone is born with the potential for this kind of danxian, the way that I'm using the word. But then you still have to create a danxian, create the space, and then you grow your danxian. This particular space between the navel and the spine is this moving space between the kidneys. In the internal arts, there's a kind of gene where you can throw people, or you have movement generated, and it actually comes between the navel and the spine. And there's this wonderful space of movement and, at first, emptiness. And by resting your awareness there, this medicine is cultivated over time, and it becomes part of this internal alchemical system that you use in different ways. But first, you have to start here. One of the best things about it, this location, is that it becomes an anchor for the mind and for the emotions. And so practices later that cultivate yang qi that might otherwise flow up and cause problems, there's a sense of settledness and anchor about it. It actually now flows down instead of flowing up. And that's just a training process. And so by cultivating this danxian, suddenly things are much safer. And so this is always a first step in this traditional alchemical system. And people often skip ahead, like we were talking about the warming methods. People jump and they're on now they start at step 20 or something, and they didn't even do the most basic part of learning to soften their body or their breath. They didn't cultivate an anchor before then cultivating all this rising qi. So there was nothing to hold it down. So it causes problems, like my own mental emotional problems that I was developing before. Very common. And so in basic practice, nurturing this space in the middle between the navel and the spine is really important. And another thing I would say about that is that when we use the word danxian in internal martial arts like taiji, and we're talking about a rotational danxian, something that turns, that's below the navel. And you'll even see it in some of my videos. This area actually just moves like a ball. It's like you swallowed a basketball and it's going like this. You can see it physically turn. And it's larger, of course, than this little area. But that's often called the sea of qi, because the movement itself flows through that and coordinates the movements through your whole body. The 18 pivots all move together. And I did get to make a video about that. And so all of these rotate, all 18 pivots, especially this one. And then eventually this guides the movements outward. And they also call that danxian, but it's kind of confusing. So usually in speech, within this system, we call the lower one that you were mentioning the rotational danxian. And sometimes you can put your mind down there, and because qi flows there, it gives your body a boost of qi, because it pours yang qi, else kind of wakes you up. That's where I used to meditate, but it doesn't have the lasting impact that we're looking for by cultivating this middle danxian, what we call the middle danxian, zhong danxian, in that space between the navel and the spine. And most important piece about that, other than that, it's generally good for the health, but in a more subtle, inside out way than just dumping qi into the channels. Most importantly, is it creates that anchor for safe practice later. I hope that answers the question. Yeah, and so I mean, in acupuncture, we don't call it the lower dantian. We just call it CFG or Ren 6 or Ren 4, depending on the treatment that we're giving. We do moxa there, this kind of thing, and it is a really good space. It's not dangerous or anything to do that. It can be beneficial for the health to nurture that point. It's just that in every system, we tend to focus on a different way. And I like to focus on this middle one because it creates something lasting and really helpful. Hmm. Sure, you're welcome. Yeah, I'm glad that you asked. And it's one of those things that every system cultivates the body slightly differently. And so I don't want to claim that there's a right way or anything. Each one moves you in a slightly different direction. And this system, the reason that I was so attracted to it is because it's famously safe. It spends so much time anchoring and settling and nourishing in a really gentle way. And it heals a lot of the damage that I've seen within myself and within my clinic because I've literally treated hundreds of people that have damage from improper practice. For some reason, it's become like a. I tried focusing on migraines and sciatica, which Chris and I were talking about this. Those were going to be my focuses, my specialties. And then my clinic filled up with people injuring themselves from bad meditation, bad Qigong. So I got to see it a lot. And so I was very attracted to this system because it's like, okay, let's take all of this time to cultivate the important, the meta skills, like the skill of letting go, the skill of becoming quiet, the skill of anchoring before doing anything else. Because those other more advanced methods work, but they become problematic if the yin and the yang aren't balanced together. Yeah, the middle one. Sure. I don't even know if there's anybody else in the chat still. And again, if you're here, if you don't put something in the chat, then I don't know that you're here because nothing, it doesn't tell me. Hey, there's a Mel. I believe Mel just woke up. Talk about turtle cultivating deep, restful energy. Hey, Steph. Thank you for joining. And yeah, I look forward to well, not quite seeing you, but at least you get to see me. And I hope you're feeling good. Let me know if you have other questions. And I appreciate that you get to join even and during all of this busy time for you. I'm so glad you like it. It's such a wonderful set, right? And it's really gentle. And there's some people here that um, they have difficulty with hyper energized emotions, hyper energized mind. I believe from some history of incorrect practices and things, and some just natural stuff. Um, and so I want to give a practice that's not going to make those things worse, but something that is gentle and healing directly that doesn't go through those pathways that might otherwise be injured. And that's a really important thing. And it's the biggest reason that I'm doing this series. You know who you are. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. There's Chris. I'm glad you're still here. And Chris, I know you know a lot about this stuff as well, so feel free to chime in. I mean, Mel, somebody who lived in a Daoist monastery, has been training, studying Taoism for years and years. We have all these highly cultivated people, very knowledgeable people in the room, the chat room. And I'll wait for you to finish your question. just sit here quietly in case there's more to the questions. And I apologize, there's this big delay between what you see and what I see from the messages. Well, I highly recommend, and I will quote my own instructor here, Master ZhiCheng, since he's the real expert here. And again, if you want to look him up, DaoistStudiesInstitute.org, Daoist with a T in this case, and that'll help you reach him. He's kind of the invisible Daoist guy, but he is fantastically knowledgeable. And so I'm always happy to answer questions, but I always want to make sure that people know that, just so you know, there's a master, like a grandmaster just here. Like I came from Costa Rica to study with him. I wasn't going to come back to the States. I was going to travel to China, but he's honestly the best. People come from China to study here with him. And so I highly recommend, if you are hunting for a master and if your energy suits each other, even though he's quite busy, looking him up as well in case you ever have questions that I am not able to answer. You happen to have a master there. I don't want to claim to be the expert around here when you've got Master ZhiCheng walking around with this big Gandalf beard. And so, oh, going for Beth. Oh, great. Have a good one, Chris. Yeah, see that nice bubble bath feeling. Yeah, you learned. Bathing is a really healing thing. So Master ZhiCheng would say that he taught external qi healing like that for years in a school, and very often it tended to cause problems, and so he stopped and developed a separate program for people to learn the method with. But the issue is that, very much like our minds, that so often until we can become very quiet mentally inside, all we're hearing is our own internal voice. We have trouble hearing past our own noise to experience the world. And at least with an internal cultivation based in Taoism, the most important thing is the ability to listen, to understand, to be clear. And so all of his training at first for these people that want to do external Qigong healing have to do with developing this capacity to be quiet, because otherwise most of what we end up feeling is our own energetic noise. And so it gives us false information back. But also because Qi carries information, our intent is more than just I'm going to push Qi here, but our intent is a lot of who and what we are. And I was saying this in some of the other classes that you may have missed, that in studies that I've actually been a part of in Tucson at the U of A, you can have massage therapists doing the same treatment on different people. And if they are doing the treatment with tension in their arms and their hands, gripping their jaw, that tension tends to move into the person receiving the treatment. And so the person feels more tense afterward. Even if they've been loosened up, they kind of feel stressed. But if you are doing the massage with soft hands, your mind is quiet, your body is soft. That information also ends up in the person you're treating, and they end up much more soft because of it. And so that actually led my teacher at the time to saying that his conclusion was that it's not as much what you do, but who you are that heals, which kind of blew my mind at the time as a graduate student. And, what does that mean? And that's why it's so important to first cultivate yourself so that you are well anchored, so that your chi is replete, is full, that you are soft yourself, your mind is quiet, your heart is really peaceful. And in that space, not just momentarily, but you live that way. And that's how your chi is baseline now. And that means that's the quality of your treatment. He would say you always start healing yourself first. Then you begin to extend your chi over time, but not expend your chi. It's kind of in the way that if I pour my energy into somebody, then all I'm doing is exhausting myself and possibly causing them problems. But if I interact with them, if I resonate with them, so that we're relating to each other, knowing how to relate to them because you're so quiet and open and healthy, then that relationship is healing for them as well as for you. And my only warning is because for me, external chi healing was the big thing that I wanted to do when I was in school, and I would spend time in clinics, and I've got lots of stories talking about my impact of healing and what it did to me. And I started doing all of this research, especially into the world of Reiki and very specific energetic healers that were in the area where I was at the time. And there was a really big problem with people becoming very sick, developing specific kinds of illnesses that are very strange. And they were all associated with these kinds of treatments that were being given. One person that I was living with, she, just as a specific story, she went off and became a Reiki master very quickly. She paid for it. She did this training. And within a year, she had developed major autoimmune symptoms. It became a whole problem. And so I had to help her take up, and I lived with her for a little while, trying to help her take care of her kids because her life fell apart. And what she was trying to do was move in the direction of being a healer, being healthy, helping the world. That was her goal, which was really wonderful. But she went through it in this way where the medicine she started practicing was actually bad for her. This Reiki that she was doing. And I can't say that, of course, about everybody. But I've had that experience, again, because of the clinic that I've had, a lot. That people doing external chi healing before they themselves are harmonized and balanced, and then they expand that balance, they end up injuring themselves and the people that they're treating. And so, of course, because I'm not there, maybe ask your own instructor about it. But my recommendation is first to become your best balanced self, inside and outside, and then start to explore that, because you become the herb. You become the medicine in a way, or you're channeling it, or you're open to it. But they can't help but experience your field in that case, and you're sharing your field. And so you have to be grounded enough to be safe, to be open, to be loving. And those qualities are the things that end up healing. And so it's good for you and good for them. And so my instructor would say that is, and on that path, the whole first step is this basis in internal alchemy of just healing the mind, balancing the body, harmonizing the emotions, releasing desire, this kind of thing. Otherwise, it can be problematic. And so that's the general statement from the master. I only know my little stories and experiences in that, but he, as the guy who trained everybody in Washington and people from China to do that stuff, he has changed how he teaches it because he saw so many problems. And I really respect that. So now he trains very few people in that, just because very few people invest the time to become free. Yeah, that's right. And if you find yourself there, you'll notice that you are healing yourself, but you'll also notice the people around you go, "Oh," and they feel better too. So you want to become a person. I was just talking about this with Mel, that you walk into a room and just the light of your space makes people feel better. And there's a healing that happens. And that's the natural extension of your chi. You're not doing it. If you're trying to shine your light, that's bad for you. But if you're just as a person full, that's the healing process. And then there's methods within at least traditional Chinese medicine that work with that. But first, cultivate the medicine that we're talking about, that Dan in the Danxian. And then that medicine is what is healing for you and for them. At least that's the theory. Oh, you're welcome. And I'll wait just another minute, see if there's other questions. And then I'm going to head out and do a bit of work. Oh, I'm glad you like it. Yeah, today I'm I'm creating a guqin instrument, a traditional Chinese instrument to play. I've just started a journey of learning to play it. I've been uploading videos of just kind of like a blog, a random journal about my experience on my Patreon. And it's been very interesting this new year to discover it. So I'm going to build my own sheen, and because I like to do woodwork, and use that experience of creating a tool of harmony I also like to make swords, and I make tools for taiji and these kinds of things. And they all have the same principles of balance and harmony, this particular state. And at least in me, I find it applicable to everything that I do.
And it's such a fun way to make all of these things work together, you know? So that's what I'm going to go out and do. Go get covered in sawdust. Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you like it. Thanks for hanging out. And yeah, and send me a message if you like, and I'll send you other stuff either on Patreon or just my email, and we'll connect. That's right. Yeah, that's right. The healing comes from the inside out. It is what you are, not what you do. I mean, what you do can be important, but first cultivate the medicine. I just think that's the coolest idea. And that changed how I did everything when I heard that. I'm like, oh, makes perfect sense. I did it wrong for years, just like all of us. But there are better ways, and it just takes a little longer. But at the end, you end up with something very different than if we rush through. But so much of us, we just want that certification. Give me the 2 week certification. But everyone here that's following something like this, we're in it for the long haul, so we want to do it right. And that's why I appreciate you. And I think you'd make a great healer, clearly. And so definitely take your time. Keep it going. Bit at a time. Thank you, Mel. All right. I love you all. Enjoy your practice. Send me a message if you've got other questions. I will see you tomorrow.